Hello, everyone. Hey, this video is going to be about Joe Paterno. Now, Joe Paterno, this report that's come out recently that Joe Paterno knew since 1976, and people in his coaching staff knew since 1976, that Jerry Sandusky, his defensive coordinator, was sexually molesting young boys. He's a pedophile, gay pedophile. So Joe Paterno knew this and continued to support Jerry Sandusky's charity work, which happened to be, it was a charity set up to help kids, without parents or kids from troubled homes. Jerry Sandusky sexually molested his own adopted son. Jerry Sandusky currently is serving 30 to 60 years in jail. And what really maddens me about this is the way people have treated Joe Paterno. They have treated Joe Paterno for the last 40 years of his life like he's a god. The guy's a goddamn football coach. But because we worship authority in this country, and because we get so mind-fucked by success and by the perceptions of success, and that's what Joe Paterno is. Joe Paterno was the perception of success. He did it the right way, quote unquote, meaning he would bring in students and athletes, and they would graduate. They would keep their grades up. They were good men after they, all that nonsense. And then he would, and he won national championships, but he did it the right way. Penn State's been called linebacker university. I mean, some great linebackers have come from Matt Millen, to LeVar Arrington, to many others. Personally, I think it's absolutely shocking that anybody would even remotely mention Joe Paterno's name anymore in a positive way. Joe Paterno, and this is not an excoriation or I'm not going after those young people who worship Joe Paterno, who are so blind that they worship authority on any level, on every level. They like authority, and an authority that's successful is even more of an authority to worship. Why we worship head football coaches in America, I have no fucking idea. And I love football. Why at some of these major universities the highest paid person is a head coach of a football team, I have no idea. And some of these universities, you can give the excuse, well, these football programs bring in a lot of money. Not all of them, and not the majority of them. In fact, they cost the school money. And these schools then are all raising their tuitions, right? Am I wrong about this? Tell me if I'm wrong. All of these schools, from Alabama to Penn State to Michigan to all of them, Duke. I mean, we can go into Mike Krzyzewski and all. They're raising their tuition. All of them. Universally, all of them are raising their tuition. So if the football teams and basketball teams were so lucrative and all these things were so lucrative, why would they be raising their tuition? Why would they be going through deficits and budget deficits if these programs were so lucrative? It's the sports stadium thing. You know that sports stadiums don't make money. They lose money. They lose tremendous amounts of money. And the city ends up paying for them all. I mean, the taxpayers almost always pay for it. Even when people say like, well, Jerry Jones put $1 billion. That stadium cost $3 billion, and the other two were come up by the taxpayers, and the land and everything else was the taxpayers. And the taxpayers then get the cost of the police. They absorb the cost of the entire area that surrounds it, from roads, from crime to environmental damage to the amount of trash that's produced by the people it's all absorbed into local landfills, used in the common roads. Airports get a lot of pressure on airports because they're flying in and out all the time. And all of those are absorbed by us, the taxpayer. And stadiums are great boondoggles. Keith Olbermann has always said something great about sports stadiums. If sports stadiums made money, then owners would be building them. But they don't build them, do they? They let the taxpayers, because they don't make money. They lose massive amounts of money. And it's a politician's legacy. We're dealing with this right now in Alaska, not with a sports stadium, but we have a governor who's a total fucking asshole liar. And he is trying to push this natural gas pipeline because this is going to be his legacy in part. He's also connected to people that can make a lot of money on it. But his legacy, so he's relentlessly we're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars in budget shortfalls. We have no money in this state right now. They're taking our dividends, the famous Alaska dividend. They're taking that dividend and they're cutting it in half and using the other half for the first time in history to pay for the budget, to absorb the budget deficit, because we can't keep using our savings for some reason. But we have to cut the dividends and do this. And this asshole governor of ours, Walker, wants to build a natural gas pipeline. And of course, the taxpayer to pay for it. For no reason. And people are actually talking about how bad natural gas is now, that natural gas actually does more damage to the environment than we thought before. And in fact, it's not good, and it's not a good alternative to fossil fuels, and it's not a good alternative to coal. And this isn't propaganda, this is science. But now that nevertheless, it's easy to get to because it sits right on top of the oil. That's where natural gas sits. And so and they want to build this natural gas pipeline. In 2016, everybody in the state's against it. Everybody's against it except for him and his cronies, and he wants it as a legacy. That's what sports stadiums are. Sports stadiums are billion-dollar legacies to whatever governor, city, mayor, manager, people, and that they usually build their careers on that. Well, our Mayor Smith, got our new Baltimore Ravens stadium built, while Baltimore is going through massive amounts of budget deficits. Poverty's at an all-increased level. We're building sports stadiums and shit. It's totally ridiculous. And then throw in college sports stadiums, and they have 100,000 people in their stadiums. And then not just for football, but for basketball's got to have a stadium, their separate stadium, and baseball team's got to have their separate stadium. Hockey team's got to have a separate stadium for them. It costs the taxpayers billions of dollars, and they never get it back. And it doesn't bring enough money to the local businesses. The argument used to be, well, the vendors and the local businesses. Nope, that's not true. The local businesses actually don't make enough money. They don't make any, they make a little bit more money, but they don't make any more money than, say, a normal average business, and they don't stay open any longer. So it's the whole economic lie and a ruse. And it all has to do with authority. I know some of you don't see that, and it's because you just, maybe I'm wrong, so I'm always willing to admit I'm wrong. But this authority in this country, it's unearned, irrational submission to authority, and it starts in school. This is the Noam Chomsky concept of why he was in high school and he couldn't figure out why he should give a shit about his football team. He doesn't know anybody on it. He's not friends with anybody on it. And if he met a football player, he'd probably hate him. And they'd hate each other. But why is he supporting? He said, and then he realized it's an integral part. It's crucially to have a football team or to have a basketball team or to have a baseball team or a soccer team or a hockey team. You need to have the fucking irrational submission to authority. So you get ready for the rest of your life to irrationally submit to authority. Unearned authority. To your teachers, to your bosses, to police, to judges, to presidents, to CEOs, to all of your societal leaders, you have an irrational submission to unearned authority. You do it all the time. And this was an example. There was a rich guy who owned I don't remember who he was. He owned, it was in, I think it was in Great Britain, and his family owned this huge manufacturing, and they thought all the workers liked them. They were fair to their workers. All bosses and all hierarchical people think that everyone loves them. And he said it was an eye-opening experience. So they sell the business, and the next day he comes in because they were having financial problems. They sold the business, and he no longer was in charge, and nobody would say hi to him. Nobody would speak to him, and it wasn't like they were being mean to him, but before when they would say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Jenkins, how are you today?" Kiss his ass. And then once he was no longer their authority, that stopped. And I've experienced this too. I was a supervisor, and I had some people under me, and then when I was no longer their supervisor, I would see them and they would treat me completely differently. And it was funny because I treat everybody the same. Like if you're my authority, I really don't care. I don't bend to authority, as you can probably tell. So I don't really care about your authority. It means nothing to me. I don't acquiesce. I don't like to kiss ass to anybody, and especially authority. But unearned authority, and you will submit to this. And police, all of it, all of your life, you will submit to authority, and you will have to because that's the society that you're in. And it goes back to when you're a kid and stuff, and when you need authority to survive as a child, and your parents are authority, etc. But then that's taken and that's ran with. So you'll do whatever your leaders say. So a CEO can, let's say, make bad investments for a business. And then the employees at the bottom, he'll make all the people at the top will make terrible decisions for the corporation. They'll make bad investments. They won't do the technology. They'll be behind on technology. They cut some corners. They make some mistakes, and it costs the company hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't get fired. The people get laid off. You lay off the bottom 15% of your workforce. You start to cut hours. You cut wages, etc. And the authority gets to dictate. He gets to make a mistake, or she gets to make a mistake. They get to make a mistake and never have to pay for it, and thus a rational submission to these people. When the workers should say, we don't lose our job, we're doing just fine down here, you're the one that fucked up, you're the one that's got to go. Workers never do that. The CEO never is fired. For a CEO to resign or fire, it takes a lot. And that's irrational submission to authority. When a manager makes a mistake at work, I think we've all experienced this if anyone's ever a manager, and they don't take responsibility for it, or they pass the blame, that's irrational submission to authority because you have to let them get away with it because they're authority. Don't piss your managers off. Don't piss your bosses off. Don't piss your teacher, your professors off. Don't piss off the police. Don't piss off this authority. I don't care about your authority. Your authority means nothing to me. It's unearned in my mind. You didn't do anything in my life to earn control over me on any level. And but our society needs you to know your place. It goes into class. It goes into, and this goes back to the Greeks. I mean, this is nothing. It's a very, and Americans usually perceive class more intellectually with what class they belong to rather than the actual class they're in. Everybody in America thinks they're middle class. I mean, it's hilarious. It's poor ass people, working class people think they're fucking middle class. And thus, they never change anything and never demand anything because they think they're middle class. I'll go into, that's Marx, and I'll go into that later, but another time. But my point is with this, that Joe Paterno is a perfect example of irrational submission. These kids are absolutely brainwashed from his authority and his success as authority. And so what they'll do is they'll look the other way, even though he protected a homosexual pedophile. Any pedophile is terrible. I don't mean to, say homosexual pedophiles are any worse. But he protected a pedophile for 40 years. And now is worshipped and revered and respected. And Friday and Saturday, they just had a private ceremony for Joe Paterno. His former players, these people all should be fucking ashamed of themselves. What they should have done was spit and said, I cannot believe I worship this man's authority when he abused it so badly. He abused his authority. It goes into as an example, Bill Clinton. I remember watching all of the Bill Clinton trials on cable news in the 90s when Bill Clinton was going through his Monica Lewinsky and Did He Lie and high crimes and misdemeanors and all of that shit. And I remember people saying, I'm a liberal, but I always hated Bill Clinton because he was anti-labor. And I would hear people say, what difference does it make who he fucks? If his policies are good, his policies were terrible to begin with, and he was fucking around with a little girl, a little intern that he took advantage of his authority over and stuck he was in his 50s, she's old enough to be his daughter, I mean literally daughter, and he was sticking fucking cigars up her cooch and coming on her dress. And making her, doing taking advantage of his authority. And nobody had a problem with that. And I said, and even my own family members were like, who cares? Who gives a shit? And I was like, you really don't see the problem with that? If he's going to do that to his own family, if he's going to do that to his own authority, is he going to take advantage of, what do you think, bombing strikes to people, he's not going to have any thought process on that. Killing people aren't going to make any difference. If he can't even keep his dick in his pants in the White House with a 23-year-old fucking intern, what do you think he's going to do when the military says, hey, we're going to bomb this over here? Do you think he's going to disagree? Do you think he's going to show any morality when he signs NAFTA or GATT or World Trade or fucking, see what I'm saying? Do you understand what I mean by that? He didn't show any morality in his own life and he abused his authority. What do you think he's going to do with people that he never has to deal with or see? This goes into your morality. This goes into authority. When you abuse your authority like that, you should have it immediately taken away because you can't do it. You cannot control your authority. I mean, we see this all the time, and people get away with it. And the higher up in positions of power they are, the more they get away with it. They can sexually abuse women. They can sexually abuse little kids. They can make horrible mistakes and dump toxins into the environment. They can be like Warren Buffett, who people worship, but he makes money on degradation and pain and suffering and agony and tragedy and shock and the worst things. And people, and we don't, because he's rich and he's an authority and because he knows how to make money, somehow it absolves all these people of all the shit that they do. And Joe Paterno is still dead. We all know that he covered up for a fucking pedophile. Used his authority, and all of these people are worshiping that very authority that he took advantage of and used to protect a pedophile. That's a psychological hurdle that has got to be 100 feet high. And it's amazing to me people don't take the 5 minutes it would take no, you'd really have to internalize it and be anti-authority maybe to even get past that. If you couldn't just take the social and moral issues, well, I know you can make an excuse, well, Joe Paterno didn't fuck any little kids. He just let his best friend, because he had authority. If Joe Paterno didn't have the authority of being the head coach at Penn State and being a god in Pennsylvania, which, by the way, if you're a god in Pennsylvania, it's what did James Carville say about Pennsylvania? No offense. I'm sorry for anybody that's from Pennsylvania. I'm the old Bill Hicks. I'm not sorry that I insulted you. I'm sorry that you're from Pennsylvania. What did James Carville say? It's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in the middle. So that's what it is. And you've got a bunch of dumb motherfuckers who literally are angry at the protesters who are saying this guy let a pedophile get away with pedophilia for 40 fucking years. He gave money to his charitable organization. He let him bring in boys to the Penn State locker room and fuck them. That's the authority that he abused. And nobody has a problem because of the authority that he had to begin with, because of our irrational submission to it and our love of authority. Donald Trump is another example. You love a slumlord, racist, sexist, misogynistic, fascist, war-hawking, fucking asshole slumlord from rich kid from fucking New Jersey. I mean, New York, wherever the fuck, whatever shithole he's from. You like him? Why? Because he's rich? Because he knows how to make money on New York real estate? Because he came from a rich family? Because he's authority? He's not an authority. He's a rich kid who made money in real estate in the most expensive real estate on the planet. With his father's money and connections, which were more important than the money. I mean, Jesus Christ, but it's an irrational submission to authority. And it doesn't matter if you're an authority making money, or if you're an authority fucking coaching a football team, or if you're the president of the United States. Thank you for listening, and I hope you get what I'm saying about authority. Thank you for listening.